Every league, around day 3, I take a look at what's going on with the meta. Knowing the meta is important for multiple reasons. First, it's a good way to see what items you want to look out for. A very good example of this that comes to mind immediately. Spectral Shield Throw is 7% of players who show up on the ladder on day 3, which means shield bases, and especially armor shield bases, are going to be way more valuable than they might be otherwise. Ice Trap, similarly at 11%, means that something like Tinker Skin is worth keeping on my filter, even if normally it would be a 2C unique that I'd just go ahead and hide. Beyond that, I like builds, and I like seeing what works and what doesn't work. So there's always a curiosity where I want to see what things from my prediction did end up coming true, which in this case I said that 3 good builds were Traps, Toxic Rain Ballista, and Explosive Arrow Ballista. And it seems like in large part that was correct. But there may also be a few surprises, so I'm going to go over some of the most popular skills, those that see at least 3% play rate within the meta. Just like how you might be surprised to learn that this video was made possible in part due to the generous support of my patrons and YouTube channel members. More on how you can support at the end. So here we have a meta for 3.15. Ice Trap has a dominant 11%, right behind it is Toxic Rain, followed by Raised Spectre, Spectral Shield Throw, Signal Prey, which is not really a damage skill, it's more of a support thing used by minion builds, Caustic Arrow, which is again tied to the Toxic Rain most likely, Forbidden Rite, one of the new skills, Summon Skeletons, and everything else is a 2% play rate or lower. Because the spread is so narrow here, if you scroll down and look at the 2%, it does start to open up. We have Freezing Pulse, likely Totems, Exsanguinate, Lightning Strike and Vol Lightning Strike, Cyclone, and Essence Drain. And below that you get even less played things. So what can we take away from this? Well, the first thing we can take away from this is traps are popular. Particularly Ice Trap is very popular. And you can see there are a lot of builds, all of which, or almost all of which, are Saboteurs. There's not too much variance here. I would bet if I look at this one, it's going to look very similar to most of the others. We've got Tinker Skin, we've got a Null and Void because Rampage is really good. We've got a one-hander and a shield. We're going to use Ice Trap with general trap supports. I'm surprised Trap and Mine's in here. Personally, I'm not really a fan of Trap and Mine. I wouldn't be surprised to see this dropped, because less mine throwing speed feels bad. And there may even be a Bear Trap hiding around, there it is, to cause bosses to take increased damage. For auras, we've probably got something like Hatred and Skitterbots, which would be pretty standard. And sure enough, we've got Hatred and Skitterbots. And then, looking at the tree, it's about what you'd expect from a standard Trapper tree. There's not going to be too much variance here. I'm sure if we show the passive tree heat map, there won't be too much difference. For now, let's go look at the Toxic Rain. Because what I'm most curious about with the Toxic Rain is how many people are actually playing Ballistas and how many are self-attack. So if we go down here and we look, 87% is self-attack, 32% is totems, 4% is mines, and a measly 0.2% is traps, despite the fact that, honestly, Toxic Rain traps sounds like a pretty good idea with all the changes and the continued nerfs to mines. So again, a lot of these builds are going to look very similar because this is a very solved archetype. The only one that's maybe a little bit weird is here, but I'm guessing it's some sort of timeless jewel. Yep, here we go. The reason this looks weird, Perfect Agony is a poison thing. You really don't see Toxic Rain played with poison, because if you try to play Toxic Rain poison, it's just Rain of Arrows poison, but bad. However, in this case, it is being converted over to Divine Flesh, which is a very strong defensive layer that I expect a lot of these builds to incorporate in the near future. This version is not using Cluster Jewels. We're probably going to see about 50-50 coming up top here versus using Cluster Jewels. And at the end of the day, the two are pretty comparable. I will say, the Thread of Hope, pretty neat. Good spot for a very large. Now, Raised Spectre is going to kind of be the same. You're going to see a lot of the same sorts of Raised Spectre builds that we've seen for a long time. So I'm going to skip that one and go to Spectral Shield Throw. It is much more interesting because people haven't been playing Spectral Shield Throw before, or at least not very much. It did get largely buffed. And so what we're seeing is a lot of people using Called Arms, which makes sense. We've got some point blank in there so that the Spectral Shield Throw does more damage to close enemies. We've got RT, lots of non-crit. This also makes sense. Early game, it's pretty hard to scale your damage if you're going crit as a melee. even harder if you're going crit as a attack projectile that's not a bow or wand skill. And we see a lot of gladiators because if you're going to be built around a shield anyway, you might as well be a big old blocky boy. I would guess we're going to see a lot of tower shields. Colossal Tower Shield is the best base. If you roll it with Dense Fossils, you'll get some pretty gnarly armor rolls. You want it to be item level 86. This is an expensive shield. In fact, just the base item is around an X last I checked. My main concern personally with Spectral Shield Throw is the single target. I'm sure it farms very, very well. I don't know that the single target is nearly as good. In this case, it looks like we've got Crimson Dance, so we don't appear to be a full bleed build, but we also don't appear to be a full hit build. Maybe the idea is to scale bleeding eventually, and the hit stuff is just to help clear for now. Corrupted Axe is pretty cute. Onslaught for 4 seconds on kill, replacing the jewels that were nerfed. And I expect we'll see a lot of similar things from a lot of the other gladiators. It does make sense to scale bleed on a gladiator, since gladiators get a ton of bleed nodes. Prismatic Eclipse in your main hand is probably pretty popular with the hit-based versions, as you can control the sockets to get global attack speed, which will apply to your shield. You can kind of think of this as a stat stick. For hit-based, I'd say this is a little bit more traditional. And then we have Forbidden Rite, which is the new skill. Usually new skills either go really well or really disastrously, and it seems like a lot of them haven't gone that well since they aren't seeing that much play. Forbidden Rite definitely looked like the strongest skill from the outset, and I'm sure the fact that Ziz made a guide about it didn't hurt anything in terms of popularity. So let's take a look and see how it looks. We've got, I would say, a pretty standard Kikazaru Soul Mantle setup for the early game, Azanaths to help with clear, then a Zerfi's Heart to gain Soul Eater when you use a Vol skill. This one is a little bit surprising to me, especially with the increased attribute requirements, but it is a good way to incorporate Ignite, Shock, and Chill, and it's much easier to Ignite, Shock, and Chill enemies now, so maybe it is in fact worth it. Of course, Rain of Splinters for +2 projectiles. It is reduced damage, but reduced damage is additive, and you get so much increased damage elsewhere that it doesn't really matter. I want to look back at someone else though, just to see, because this is a new archetype. Is this the standard setup, or are there different things going on? I also noticed there's a few people with Pain Attunement and a lot without. Pain Attunement, I'd suggest Coward's Legacy. Yep, Coward's Legacy and Viridi's Veil, which opens up your ring slots as you can now be curse immune via Viridi's, rather than having to worry about curse reduction via Kikazaru. So this will be a much higher damage version, and we've got an Unnatural Instinct. So, oh, that is a shiny jewel. It's unfortunate that the 1% pen doesn't work because this is a chaos skill. Someone would pay real good money for those corruptions, though. Okay, I think he's just a madman that voled all his gear. But it looks like this is the sort of setup for a high-budget version, and the one we saw previously is more of a setup for the low-budget version. With all this stuff, one of the weapons has been dropped, which does make sense because one additional totem is going to add a lot more damage than a weapon, especially since you could in theory get +1 chaos gems on it, but that's probably going to be a very expensive purchase. Most of these builds are Mind Over Matter, and they are scaling a little bit of mana. They're mostly just using it as a nominal defense and then tossing Zealotry in an Essence Worm. I'm not sure if the level of mana investment is really great on some of these, as I notice their health pools are sometimes horrifyingly low. But I guess with Hierophant and with the Mind Over Matter effect, it might not be the worst thing. I'm very curious about the Apeps here. I guess it is a lot of flat damage, but I feel like the whole point of playing the Totem build is totems have a ton of flat life anyway, so I'm slightly surprised that the Apeps is being used. I'm not sure it's actually worth it. Seems to be doing decently though, so could be worth. If you've played the build and if you've used Apeps, let me know down in the comments below if it's actually worth it or if it's a trap. But those are just some of my thoughts on some of the skills that are shaping up to be the early game meta. To reiterate, it is Ice Trap, Toxic Rain, Raised Spectre, Spectral Shield Throw, and Forbidden Rite as the top 5. That's 3 skills that in the past have been solved, although they did require some reworking of builds to account for the nerfs, especially for Spectres, which got hit the hardest by the change to minion damage. Spectral Shield Throw, which, despite not being a new skill, is basically a new skill because it was terrible before. And Forbidden Rite, which is a new skill, looks insanely strong, and if you want to see some Forbidden Rite gameplay, I'm definitely playing it this league. I don't know if it's going to be the next build or the build after that, but I will be playing it, so be sure to subscribe to the channel and join my Discord. For that, I turn the question over to you. What did your league start? Was it one of the builds on this list, which is about 50% of the total player base, according to Puri Ninja, or did you start something else? I'd love to hear your thoughts down below. Thank you for watching, and if you liked the video, be sure to give it a thumbs up. A special thanks to my YouTube channel members and patrons, whose generous support keeps me from needing to accept sketchy mobile game sponsorships. If you want the best way to keep up with my video releases and live streams, or maybe just hang out and chat with a bunch of like-minded people, be sure to join the Discord. You can find all these links down in the description below. Thank you again, and I hope you have a great day.